Okay, so I want you guys to listen up to this because this part, this shows how nefarious this really is. This program was really a scam.
DARE was started as a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
But eventually it went public on the stock exchange. And I don't understand how that happened or what or why.
DARE was public on the stock exchange?
Yes.
How it wasn't making money?
I don't understand. I do know that there are for-profit businesses that sell these experiences to schools where they come in and they sell like $20,000 a year. They come in and they'll do this thing for your school, and it's like the big event. And
yeah, we'll kill a kid in the front yard.
Yeah, and these are legitimate businesses that do this. DARE obviously had crushed the merchandise game. And so they had a lot of great merch. After every assembly, they set up a merch table and you could buy the t-shirts and stuff. But they didn't actually sell them. I think they just gave them away. But you could buy them at they sold them at my Walmart. So I don't know.
So yes, the whole merch thing. In fact, let me share this with you guys because they did and still do sell merch. So you're going to be going, I remember. Oh my goodness. Look, this is going to be an interesting story to get into right here. Look, DARE. DARE is an acronym for people who have not lived in the United States for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. And so this was a program that was taught in schools across the nation. So here's what will happen. You're in about third grade or fourth grade. And what happens is a police officer would come into your classroom and basically the teacher be like, all right, class, this is Officer so-and-so. They're here to teach you about DARE. And then the cop comes in and then they teach you what DARE means about drug abuse, resistance education. And sometimes they'll have either a mascot like a bear or a dog, or now then towards the later date, they had a lion, and basically talking about drug abuse. And so a lot of us have went through this, right? Like how many, put a thumbs up in the chat if you actually, you know what, make it easier. Put a 1 in the chat if you've ever had to go through the DARE program. Put a 2 in the chat if you never had to go through the DARE program. But because here's the thing, I had to go through it in 3rd and 4th grade and 5th grade. And so this program was supposed to be a way to prevent kids from getting into drug abuse and subsequently getting into crime, right? And so looking back on it, I'm like, I don't think it worked. I just don't think it worked at all. And so, because I was thinking about this, I was just like, man, that was one program where they said that they tried to, I guess, deviate us from attraction to substances and get us to be, completely abstinent of substances. Meanwhile, they had no issues with substances like caffeine or alcohol, which are also drugs. So they didn't talk about that, but they talk about, drugs and their types, whether they're stimulants or whether they're psilocybins or whether you have ones that are uppers and downers, and they taught you all these things. I remember a puppet show in the 3rd grade. It was, let me see, what school was I going to? I was going to Sadler Elementary. What? No. I was going to Palmetto Elementary School. 3rd grade. And I remember they had different people that classified for different drugs. You had the pothead, you had the dude that was in cocaine, and you had another one that was like speed. And they always exhibited these these tropes that you associate with people who are addicted to certain drugs, and these puppets, right? And they did this puppet show in our lunchroom, and it was like they try to teach you about the dangers of drugs, and meanwhile we're 8, 9 years old being taught about this. And so come to find out now, I think it may have had the reverse effect. But let's get into this article. I want to get into this, and then also there's some video that I want to get into because somebody also talks about some things as well. But this actually an interesting article that actually talks about how DARE began and how it's also basically police brainwashing. So let's get into that. So it says DARE is more than just anti-drug education, it's police propaganda. So this is interesting. Let's get into this. All right. Remember signs like this? This is a DARE drug-free school zone. Meanwhile, the teachers are drinking coffee in their break room. But so it says DARE celebrated its 40th anniversary last year. Schools continue to graduate DARE classes, albeit far from a slower pace than during the program's heyday in the 1980s and 1990s. While DARE gained widespread support and resources on the presumption that it was an alternative to the supply side approaches to the drug war that relied on arrest and incarceration, many research shows that DARE was less an alternative to policing and more of a complementary piece of law enforcement's larger war on drugs. As police fought and continued to fight a drug war primarily through violent criminalization, arrest, and incarceration, their presence in schools presents law enforcement a way to advance the police mission of defending the law-abiding from the criminal element of society by another means. In the process, DARE offers reliably positive public relations when reactionary police activities garner unwanted political critique or public protest, offering a kind of built-in legitimacy that shields against more radical efforts to dismantle police power. I'm going to read this part again because I think this is really important. It says DARE offers a reliably positive public relations when reactionary police activities garner unwanted political critique or public protest, offering a kind of built-in legitimacy that shields against more radical efforts to dismantle police power. So here's the point. DARE was there. I didn't mean it for that to rhyme, but DARE was there to scare all of us into being more compliant, but it was addressing it from a law and crime perspective instead of it being addressed from a health perspective. Because as we know now, and they actually did know back then, is that drug addiction and drug abuse is really a health issue, not a criminal one. But they didn't care because ultimately it was about catching the bad guys. Meanwhile, by the way, the CIA was actually one of the main purveyors of drugs within our country, actually selling drugs to all of the people, especially within Black and brown communities, thus ushering in the crack epidemic that happened in the late 70s and early 80s and even into the 90s. So if DARE was supposed to work, that means our intelligence agencies were literally working against the police. Uh-oh. See, that's the problem, right? A lot of people don't realize that. Like, our neighborhoods were flooded with drugs primarily by our own government. And so when people go, well, all these people, they're on drugs and it's just because they're bad people. It's like, no. The government's bad, right? Because it's being held by big corporations who want to keep that power. The war on drugs was actually started by Ronald. I'm sorry, I was going to say Ronald Reagan. Sorry, wrong demon. It was by Richard Nixon. And so Richard Nixon started the war on drugs. And one of his advisors said that we knew that the war on drugs was a farce, but we needed to get rid of the anti-war hippies, the anti-war white people, and also the pro-liberation black people. They had to get rid of them because they want to continue the regime change wars. And they also wanted to get rid of anybody that was fighting for civil rights. And so this is why the drug war started. It was really to shut all of us down, the left down. And so because of that, they introduced and flooded our neighborhoods with drugs. And so this increases the crime rate because people who are addicted to a substance, they need to get a hold of that substance. So therefore they need money for it. And if they don't have money, then they got to get the money. And if they have to get the money, sometimes they got to steal to get it. Sometimes they got to rob to get it. And therefore, guess what? Crime rates go up. And those drugs cost money. So guess what? Because they cost money, that means there's profit to be made. That's essentially capitalism. And they keep it illegal so that who else can make money? The carceral system, the prison industrial complex, the people who run the jails, the people who give you your special food in your commissary, the people who make the clothes in the jails. Remember, we talked about this last week. With state troopers having quotas, right? Let's start connecting the dots. And people who say, oh my goodness, well, drug abuse is a choice. Is it a choice? Yeah. But just because it's a choice doesn't mean it was not a choice made under duress. Do we need to go over the definition of duress again? Do we? Because the thing is, like, a lot of times people will self-medicate, especially when they don't have access, real, true access, by necessity, to mental health professionals. So it's all connected. We got to connect the dots. We got to click, connect the dots. Because here's the problem. A lot of times people will say, well, that's your you problem because you chose. And the thing is like, okay, then if that's the case, stop drinking wine. You're trying to escape, aren't you? The thing is that people are trying to escape pain. I'm going to make a statement. Some of you may disagree. You're wrong, but you're going to disagree. Trauma is a gateway drug. If you do not address the trauma, a person is going to try to self-medicate to deaden that feeling within them. That's just how the human brain works. And it could be through either getting drugs from outside of our body or utilizing the drugs that's already in our body, things like oxytocin and serotonin. Right? We literally have drugs that are produced in our own brains. And it's activated by certain things that we may do, whether it's through sex, food, shopping. It could be through exercise. We access these drugs that are literally produced in our own brains. Right? So that's the case. I mean, are we all on something? Yeah. But the thing is like people are using it as a crutch because of the trauma that they have endured. And sometimes the trauma may be economic. And so this program is addressing a system that was literally manufactured primarily by our intelligence agencies that are working on behalf of the big corporations so that they can make more money. And so when you have cops now coming into our schools to teach us about the dangers of drugs, that's like being in a boat, taking a bucket, putting it in the ocean water, and then throwing it overboard on the other side. Did you do anything? No, you didn't. Let's continue on before I go on another tangent. It says Dare America, the nonprofit organization that coordinates the program, suggests that Dare has evolved into a comprehensive yet flexible program of prevention education curricula. But the program remains largely faithful to its original carceral approach and goal of legitimizing police authority through drug education and prevention. The revised curriculum still ultimately skews towards an abstinence-only, zero-tolerance approach that criminalizes drugs and drug users. Let me ask you something. When it comes to sex ed, how well has teaching abstinence, how well has that actually worked out with sex ed? Oh my goodness, man. Curiosity kills the cat, but the strategy brought it back. Let me tell you something. This is why not only teaching abstinence is probably one to be the best thing, but also teaching people how to deal with the situation if you're in it. There's also a great way to prevent further harm, but some people don't want to teach that. People would get mad if you were to put in the boys' bathroom a bowl full of condoms. Oh my God, you can't believe you're doing that. You're going to be encouraging them to have sex. It's like, we're trying to keep them from getting pregnant, from impregnating somebody or transferring some STI because we know that they're going to do it anyway. Now, we'll encourage them to not do it. We will teach abstinence along with safety, but we know that kids do stupid shit. If you're an adult, you have done stupid shit when you were a kid. I have done stupid shit when you were a kid. We all do it. And so therefore, in order to keep that harm from being permanent, you also teach methods and ways that are safe so that we do not have permanent harm. It's just like giving a kid an EpiPen who has an allergy. Maybe that kid had a moment of weakness and they saw that peanut butter and jelly sandwich and they were like, oh my God, this is so delicious. But next thing you know, now their throat starts to close up. Or maybe somebody snuck something in there. Or maybe somebody was dealing with peanuts and cashews and almonds, and next thing you know, they didn't wash their hands and now they're handling something. You never know. But safety is there just in case. It's the same thing with substance abuse. Teach the abstinence, fine, but also ways in which, just in case, you also know what to do if in case somebody is on something. And most likely, the response is something that is medical intervention that will help the person. Because ultimately, it's a medical issue. It fails to embrace harm reduction approaches, such as sharing information on how students can minimize health risks if they do choose to use drugs, even as research increasingly demonstrates the effectiveness of such methods and as knowledge about the harmful effects of hyper-punitive abstinence-only drug education becomes more mainstream. Let's get into this. It says DARE was, in fact, born out of police failure. The brainchild of Los Angeles Police Department Chief of Police Daryl Gates and other brass, the drug education program got its start in Los Angeles, where LAPD's efforts to stem youth drug use has repeatedly failed. The LAPD actually tried placing undercover officers in schools as early as 1974 to root out drug dealers, but drug use among young Angelenos only increased in intervening years, making a mockery of the police anti-drug enforcement in schools. Recognizing his failure, Gates looked for an alternative to supply reduction efforts, which relied on vigorous law enforcement operations. He began talking about the need to reduce the demand for drugs, especially by kids and teenagers. In January of 1983, he approached the Los Angeles Unified School District, LAUSD, with an idea. Schools needed a new type of drug education and prevention program. Working with LAUSD officials, LAPD brass developed a proposal for the use of police officers to teach a new form of substance abuse education in Los Angeles schools. So here's the pedigree of this officer. Gates says the program that emerged from the work was Project DARE. The joint LAPD and LAUSD venture launched a pilot program in the fall of 1983. Project DARE came at a moment when the LAPD waged a violent and racist drug war on city streets. If Gates promoted DARE as an alternative, he was certainly no slouch when it came to combating drugs. A longtime LAPD officer who had helped create the nation's first SWAT team in Los Angeles following the 1965 Watts uprising, Gates believed in asserting aggressive police power to wage what he described as a literal war to control the streets, especially in the city's Black and Latino neighborhoods. Gates rose to chief of police in 1978 and oversaw vigorous and violent war on drugs and gangs, relying on a destructive mix of anti-drug raids and gang sweeps and targeted Black and Latin youth. Perhaps Gates' most notorious statement about his attitude towards treatment of drug users came when he quipped to a congressional committee, quote, "The casual user ought to be taken out and blank." I can't say that on YouTube, but y'all can read. End quote. Gates' militarized and flagrantly racist approach, drug and crime enforcement, provoked growing scrutiny from anti-police activists who called out the LAPD for its racism and abuse in the years prior to 1991 beating of Rodney King and the 1992 Los Angeles Rebellion. I guarantee you, many of us who are millennial, because back when Rodney King was beaten in the LA riots, I was a little kid. Those of you who are Gen X were probably either in middle school or in high school at the time. So you guys remember that very, very well. And so, yeah, this is one of the guys that actually helped create SWAT teams. And he was a racist. That's who created DARE. All right. Now, let's go here. It says early returns from the DARE program pointed to an effective and successful program. Studies conducted in the mid-1980s by Glenn Nairi of the Evaluation and Training Institute, an organization hired by the LAPD to evaluate the program in its early years, found positive results when it came to student attitudes about drug use, knowledge of how to say no, and respect for the police. School administrators and classroom teachers also responded to the program with gusto, reporting better student behavior and discipline in the classroom. Students also seemed to like the program, especially since most of the evidence of student reactions came from DARE essays written in class or in DARE's public relations material. As one DARE graduate recalled, the program ended, "I'm sad because we couldn't see our officer again, and happy because we know we don't have to take drugs." That LAPD handpicked ETI to conduct this assessment suggested hardly an independent evaluation, a fact that some observers noted at the time. Nevertheless, such initial positive results gave LAPD and LAUSD officials a gloss of authority and primed them to make good on their promise of bringing programs to every student in the country. And they very nearly did. So it says, at its height, police officers taught DARE to 5th and 6th grade students in more than 75% of American school districts, as well as in a dozen countries around the world. Officers came to Los Angeles to be trained in the delivery of the DARE curriculum. The demand for DARE led to a creation of network and training centers across the country, which vastly expanded the network of trained DARE officers, DARE leaders, and also created DARE parent program to teach parents how to know the signs of youth drug use and the best approach dealing with their kids who use drugs. DARE, in short, created a wide network that linked police, schools, and parents in the common cause of stopping youth drug use. And it talks about how politicians actually across the board love DARE. They love this program, right? And then we also have the whole say no to drugs, like, Nancy Reagan was basically championing. It says officers did much more than just teach DARE classes. DARE officers embedded themselves in their communities, engaging in a wide variety of extracurricular activities. For instance, one officer coached a DARE track club. The other coached a football team. Some even played Santa Claus and Rudolph during the holidays to bolster their authority on a national scale. DARE administrators constructed a public relations campaign enlisting athletes and celebrities to promote the program and facilitate trust between children and the police. So basically, this was a major source of propaganda in our schools to make police look and seen in a better light, even though they were bashing my people's heads in on the nightly news. Oh, police aren't bad. Look, Officer so-and-so, I see him a few days a week, and he teaches me about being anti-drug. Meanwhile, to the adults who may be using substances to cope with life, that's not their experience of that police officer being good to them or being nice to them or treating them with dignity and respect and following the law. That wasn't their experience. Hell, some of the police actually sold drugs to these people. Oh, wait, you didn't know that? Oh, let me show you. Yeah, you didn't notice some of these police were actually selling drugs to the very people who might be related to these little kids? Oh, man. Let me share this with you. It says prosecutor seeks to clear records of people charged with buying Broward County Sheriff's office-made crack in the 1980s. Oh, wow. How much you want to bet some of these officers that were making crack inside their offices were also doing the DARE program too? Says the Florida prosecutor said he will seek to vacate as many 2,600 convictions of people who bought crack cocaine manufactured by the Broward County Sheriff's Office for sting operations between 1988 and 1990. The Florida Supreme Court ruled in 1993 that people couldn't be charged in cases where the sheriff's office had made the crack cocaine and undercover deputies then sold it to buyers who were arrested and charged. Broward County State Attorney Harold F. Pryor said on Friday that while his office was reviewing old records, prosecutors realized that many of the people may still have criminal charges, convictions on their records because of the sting operation. It says they were arresting people not for selling, but for purchasing. Wow. He said they had detention deputies posing as dealers. They would sell it, and these poor people who were addicts were buying it, and they were selling it within 1,000 feet of schools, so the penalties would be greater. It was a scam. It was an operation. You got the DARE program being taught at the school, and then they would purposefully sell it within 1,000 feet. Undercover officers purposefully sell it within 1,000 feet of a school. And so then anybody who had an addiction, which is a health issue, because they're trying to dull some type of pain or escape, then guess what? They will get arrested. And they may even be the family members of those kids at that same school. And they will get arrested and put in jail. And then people go, and then you got people going, oh my God, there's no black men in the house. What happened to all our black men? We need a father in the house. Y'all arrested them all. First, y'all make cost of living way too hard. And then because of your of the racism within the country, you guys didn't want to hire any of these black men. So then, of course, because you didn't want to hire them and it was jobs that were hard to get, especially starting in the 1970s and onward, then a lot of them felt depressed. They felt low. They felt dejected. So guess what? They had to dull that pain. So what did they do? They started using some drugs to dull that pain. And it may have even been the first time of even possessing such a thing. But guess what? They got caught up by the police. And next thing you know, because of the war on drugs that was even intensified by people like former President Joe Biden, they got the zero tolerance and they got mandatory minimums and all of that. And then they got thrown in prison. So guess what? They were out of their kids' lives for a period of time, maybe even throughout their entire kids' childhood. And then people are like, oh my God, there's no black fathers in the household. Well, because you treated drug use as a criminal issue instead of a health issue. Why were these men, in particular, why were they depressed so much? Why were they sad? Why were they always feeling low and sad and depressed and dejected? Well, maybe part of it had to do with the anti-blackness and the white supremacy that we were experiencing in this nation. And then materially, we really couldn't provide for our families because they weren't being hired because they were black, even though they may have been qualified and hardworking. Maybe, just maybe, and this includes the white people, maybe, just maybe, if y'all didn't pass things like NAFTA or permanent normal trade relations with China, which also took jobs and then shipped them overseas and then took manufacturing away. So then now you have all these people sitting there who actually have no jobs and their life is now turned into poop. And how do they cope? How do they deal? It was either through alcohol, which means that alcoholism went up, or it was through illicit drugs because illicit drug use went up. Because they were trying to cope. Because the economic situation got precarious. And this is the thing. Some people do not want to connect the dots because they want to seem like they're better than the other people. They want to say, I've never done all these things, so therefore I'm better than you. Why didn't you do the exact same thing that I did? People react in different ways. People deal with things in different ways. Some people can't handle certain things. But that means that it takes compassion, that takes empathy. We do not have a compassionate system. We do not have an empathetic system. A system that's bred on exploitation and taking advantage of people and profits over people. This goes deeper. Let's get into this further. And then I also have a video I want to share. Let's go back into the original article. All right. So this was really just a way of making it so that there was a program really to make police seem like they're always good, always the ones who are looking out for the best in the community, when in reality, we know differently. Says the underlying goal is to transform the image of the police in the minds of kids, to develop a rapport with students so that they no longer view the police as threatening or the enforcers of drug laws. But DARE's message about zero tolerance for drug use and legitimacy of police authority sometimes led to dire consequences that ultimately reveal the law enforcement's quite broad power to punish. The most high-profile instances occurred when students told their DARE officers about their parents' drug use, which occasionally led to the arrest of the child's family members. For those students who took the DARE message to heart, they unwittingly became snitches, serving as the eyes and ears of the police and giving law enforcement additional avenues for surveilling and criminalizing community drug use. So, DARE was also a way for police to get into your business at home. This is the beginning of surveillance. Have the kids just snitch on their parents. Here we go. The DARE snitches. The program was about education, but it was also about surveillance. Here is Nancy Reagan, and they have a whole bunch of kids. They look like to be about 4th or 5th graders. So the government was deeply involved in this. So this is the other side that people weren't talking about how a lot of kids who were taught this, guess what? They thought, well, I'm doing the right thing. And then their parents would get arrested. How many parents did we have that smoked the Jolly Green Giant when we were little? Imagine how many kids probably told them their parents. Let me go to this video because they also talk about this story too. Let me make sure I have this. Yeah. So this podcast, they actually talked about how the DARE program didn't work. Let's go here to this time stamp. 12:44. Let me see. We'll start. Yeah, we'll start there. All right, let's go.
So he's not doing good things then.
No. Yes. No.
So
yeah.
He's still
absolutely not
corrupt.
In the middle of his career, right smack in the middle of his career, in the late 70s, early 80s, he ran a group called the PDID, which was the Public
And
Disorder
what's his role?
Intelligence
He's
Division.
the
Chief of Police.
Chief of Police.
Yeah, for
Okay.
the LAPD. He puts together the PDID, the Public Disorder Intelligence Division.
Public Disorder Intelligence. Okay.
And the idea was pretty simple. He said, look, drug abuse is an issue in our schools. It would be sweet if I had a spy network in the schools. And so
I'm telling you, I knew the second Officer Lacey came into our classroom. I said, this guy's a narc. I tried to tell the other kids. I was in kindergarten, and I was like, he's a narc. Don't trust him.
He literally did 21 Jump Street. He had undercover cops that went and were high schoolers and went to high school and were looking for the drug dealers in the high school, was the concept, literally.
Were there drug dealers in the high schools?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen like reports that said that. Most likely, probably some.
And when we're talking about drug dealers, are we talking like
it's marijuana? It was.
That's
marijuana.
what I'm saying.
Like, let's be real.
Like, it's not like
yeah. This thing happens.
Yeah.
The ACLU finds out, and they're like, "Hey, I don't think you're allowed to do that." And so this ends up becoming this massive court case, and the U.S. government, the federal government, shuts down the PDID. They're like, "Yeah, you can't just spy on kids in schools, and you can't send undercover officers in there without a reason in advance. Like, you have to have evidence that there's something.
Yeah, there's got to be
to send an undercover officer into the school."
Sure.
And he was so mad about this. He was like,
So essentially, they needed probable cause, but they were doing it without probable cause. This was just, let's spy on them to see what's going on. Let's sweep. So the creator of SWAT, and they also covered how he's connected to, he came up in the ranks because the former chief of police before him was actually one of the people who actually destroyed all of the photo evidence and camera evidence that was connected to Robert F. Kennedy Sr. being murdered by Sirhan Sirhan. And so because he had all that evidence destroyed, then that took him out of being the police chief. So now you have this guy who is basically a big old racist, and then also wanting to militarize police like the SWAT team and commit mass surveillance of us, which now we have a huge amount of militarized police before us today. See how it follows? See how it follows? Okay. All right. Let's continue this here.
I had one of the best spy networks in the public school system anyone's ever had in the public school system, and the federal government shut it down. And he was very, very frustrated about it.
Okay.
And so he spent some time trying to figure out how can he replace his spy network. And he found out about the LA School Board had like a program called the SMART program. It had been running for a few years.
How long has he been chief of police at this point?
I mean, at this point, this is, I believe it was the early 90s when they shut down his PDID.
So he's been the chief of police.
He's been the chief of police for a while. He ran the PDID for a long time.
So I see how it's relevant that we started at RFK's
No, that's how he became chief of police.
Okay.
That's how he got here.
Okay.
And it's important because it paints the background that he was already a high-ranking official in the police department.
Okay.
So he was
they burned the photos.
a part of burning all these photos.
Yeah.
He was doing some sketchy stuff, is what I'm trying to illustrate. And then he started the SWAT team, sketchy. Started the PDID, sketchy. The PDID gets shut down, and he says, "What do we do?" And so he finds out about the SMART program, which is an LA school district program to combat drug abuse in their schools.
Yeah.
And they have been running for years. And this was run by the actual school board. And they had brought in and partnered with local universities to pilot programs that could actually make a difference.
Sure.
And they had attempted many years earlier a program where they would go into the schools and they would equip teachers to educate the kids about drug abuse and the dangers of it and why you shouldn't do it. And what they found is that this program was not effective at all. It actually led to an increase in drug abuse in their schools.
Curiosity killed the cat, but the strategy brought it back. How many of you didn't know what the heck these drugs did, but then you found out when you were little kids and you were like, this sounds kind of interesting. You made them curious. Dare was a scam.
And they think the reason for that is because it made it seem kind of cool.
Look at this picture of these teens on drugs. And it's just like a house party, and they're like,
So that's one piece that I wanted to play for you guys because I think it's absolutely important. Knowing the connections of this guy who was the chief of police. I want to go to this next part. Let me see and go here. Let's go to this timestamp. All right, let's go here.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. It was a suggestion box that they put in every classroom.
Yeah,
the suggestion was, I think somebody's using drugs.
Well, no, I think it was a tip line essentially of like, and they even told us too, like, because it was more than drugs that they walked over. Like I said, they did the whole like kidnapping thing.
Yeah,
they taught us about if what abuse looks like. If you're experiencing this at home, you can put this in the car. It was
which. This is another
theory,
one of those things where if you think about it for a second, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. You should give
if you think about it for another second,
you realize that what happens is first, these are children. Yeah. They don't really know what they're talking about. And so like you end up with tips that maybe aren't very true or inaccurate.
Right.
But also sometimes you do get tips that are accurate. And what was more common than anything out of these confidential boxes was kids reporting their parents for drug abuse. And what inevitably happens is these kids report their parents get arrested, they go into foster care because now they don't have someone to care for them. And eventually the kid learns that it was their fault. Like technically it was their parents' fault, the parent did it, but they learned they're the person who made this happen.
Well, but also like, I remember one time getting really mad at my mom while she was driving because she took a sip of her Diet Coke and I said, you can't drink and drive, So it's like, if I told I was like, my mom drinks and drives.
Yeah. Because you're a kid and you don't understand.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so these are things where, it sounds like a good idea, but in practice, what ended up happening is it caused a lot more trauma than was necessary. And a lot of these situations, the majority of them, their parents smoked weed sometimes.
Sure.
Let's be honest. So it ended up being a traumatic thing for a lot of children, kind of unnecessarily. And it started to get a lot of blowback. A lot of parents started comparing it to the late Weimar Republic because of that, encouraging children.
I was going to say the 1984, like, that's, wow.
Yeah, so it was.
So, this part is also setting people up for taking them out of their kids' lives just because they partook of the Jolly Green Giant. For the most part, I mean, that was pretty much what it was. Funny thing is, parents who, got themselves a little bit of broccoli, they were way less dangerous than parents who were drinking alcohol on a regular basis or who were alcoholics. But also, this shows that what if we treated this as a health issue instead of a criminal issue? What if we would have treated it as a mental health issue and said, instead of sending police, get counselors for the parents who may be dealing with things? But they didn't do that. They arrested the parents, put the kids in foster care, because the kids were taught, well, these are drugs, and so you have to report them. Now, did child abuse happen? Yes. But are people really looking for the signs of things like that? Or were they just looking for any and everything that they can to incarcerate more people? And a lot of these BEAR programs were especially in Black and brown schools. Like, they were in white schools, but they were heavy in Black and brown schools. We had SROs in my schools. That stands for School Resource Officer. Where you have police strolling up and down our hallways at school. Hell, I had a class about the law, essentially, and dealing with police when I was in middle school. And I went to a predominantly Black middle school. Actually, 90% of all the schools I went to were predominantly Black. But at my middle school, They put a black police officer in front of us, and he taught us about how police operate. And of course, the different tactics and weapons that they use. Let's continue.
It was a weird program, but it spread like wildfire. And by 1990, it was in like 75% of school districts across America.
Yeah.
And
could schools opt out of it?
Yeah, it was. Here's what's really strange about DARE, and I still don't understand this.
Okay, so I want you guys to listen up to this, because this part, this shows how nefarious this really is. This program was really a scam.
DARE was started as a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
But eventually it went public on the stock exchange. And I don't understand how that happened or what or why.
DARE was public on the stock exchange?
Yes.
How it wasn't making... Huh?
I don't understand. I do know that there are for-profit businesses that sell these experiences to schools, where they come in and they sell like $20,000 a year. They come in and they'll do this thing for your school, and it's like the big event.
Now, I will say this. I have been looking for evidence of DARE being on the U.S. Stock Exchange. I did not personally see any evidence of that. However, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually happened. But I didn't see any evidence of it so far. But if you know of any evidence, please let me know in the comments, because I'm actually very curious about that. So, I don't put nothing past the cops. You know what I mean?
And
yeah, we'll kill a kid in the front yard.
Yeah. And these are legitimate businesses that do this. DARE obviously had crushed the merchandise game. And so they had a lot of great merch. After every assembly, they set up a merch table and you could buy the t-shirts and stuff. But they didn't actually sell them. I think they just gave them away. But you could buy them at they sold them at my Walmart. So I don't know.
So yes, the whole merch thing. In fact, let me share this with you guys, because they did and still do sell merch. I'm gonna show y'all. A lot of people are like, what in the world? Merch for DARE? I'm not even gonna tell y'all the website, because they don't need no more money. But y'all can see it anyway. But anyways, here is the catalog that they have. And that they got t-shirts, they got plaques, they got stickers, they got pencil boxes, they got pens, they got the keeping it real when keeping it real goes wrong. They got the school supplies, right? They got keeping it real workbooks, $165 for a workbook. Not updated version. English middle school keeping it real workbooks, $155. A core workbook, $135. Then they have the classic graduation tee. So t-shirts. They got a stuffed lion, 18-inch stuffed lion. That's $25.80. Yeah. So they got these, right? So they still sell merch for DARE when drugs actually won the war on drugs. It is hilarious on its face. But let me finish this out, because I want to get into this too.
Yeah, I don't know. But they did go public on the stock exchange, which is very strange. Started as a nonprofit. But their business model was very interesting, because they had their board of directors at the top.
Okay.
And it was Daryl Gates and then a handful of LAPD police officers. And then very influential businessmen, billionaires were at the top of this list. Handful of people on the Epstein list. And they then would, I guess, sell franchises out to local municipalities. And they'd be like, hey, you're a cop.
So the police department would have to license the name to use that
it wasn't
program.
even the department. It was police officers. Off-duty police officers could get a side gig as a DARE officer. And so they could then get the DARE car and like all the DARE merch, and they buy all the boxes of the DARE stuff and the stuffed animals, and then they could go do it in their school. And then they could recruit other police officers in their area and in the school district to grow.
Okay.
And then those police officers could recruit other police officers to do it. And that's why it spread so fast, because it was kind of an MLM. And the way they got that model, one of the board members, the founder of Herbalife.
Got it. Okay.
And he's like, I know how to make this.
He's like, hey, I know how to make this work. You get one cop to get another cop to get another cop. I mean, within 7 cops, you got the whole police force and every cop that exists. I think
all the cops.
Seven rounds.
it's 6 degrees of separation.
But when that cop gets another cop to do it, then that cop gets part of their commission. Did it work like a pyramid scheme?
Yeah. The more people you recruited, the more kickbacks you got as the police officer. So you were incentivized to recruit more police
DARE
officers.
was a police officer pyramid scheme the whole time?
Yeah.
It's a scam, y'all. It ruined lives. It got police more overtime. They sold some merch. They have very rich people on the board. They traumatized kids. And they treated drug addiction as a criminal issue instead of a health issue. Welcome to the United States, baby. So this is why I wanted to focus on this, because this affected working people, working class people the most. This is why, and here's the thing. I am a big proponent of treating drug addiction as a health issue, but that would mean that we need to have a nationalized healthcare system. That means that we need to actually see healthcare as a necessity for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and it should not be paywalled to anyone within this country. And so this is why I talk about changing the system and building dual power, because in order for us to be able to combat things like this, what needs to happen is we need to actually get out of this system and actually have something that teaches kids about substances in a real way and treats using substances as a crutch as a medical issue, so that everyone can have a more better, dignified life. Why are people addicted to substances? We got to attack that underlying cause. And the only way we can actually do that by having a system that actually works for the people, not for the people at the top. And yes, there definitely was a scam. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look